I'll tell you right now, kids, this technology is enough to make a cussing man out of me. But technology has never been known to defeat me. It did not tonight. If I can't help it, it never will. In spite of all the odds, in spite of streaming problems, Wi-Fi problems, internet problems, software problems, firmware problems, tripod problems, problems, this is still Tent Talks Tunes. We're going to get the clapboard going. And it's still me, your long-suffering host, Malcolm Tent from Danbury, Connecticut. Man, I'll tell you, when I opened up Trash American Style 37 years ago today, this very day, I could never have possibly foreseen the technological bullshit that awaited me many years in the distant future. 1986 was a whole different world than 2023, kids, at least as far as technology goes. I'll drink a big dose of Danbury tap water to that. The human animal hasn't changed in the slightest bit. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a big history buff. I love history, all eras of history. And I'm actually watching a really good documentary on the Gilded Age right now. The Gilded Age, approximately the years 1895 to 1910 in the U.S. And watching this documentary simply reinforces what I've known for a long time. Human beings have never changed. We, the genetic defective hairless monkeys, the faulty descendants of cannibalistic brain-eating apes, we've never changed. 1% has always owned the other 99%. There's always been the unbridgeable gulf between the haves and the have-nots. Governments have always been corrupt. Nothing's ever changed. There is no news. There is nothing new under the sun. So everything that people are wound up about and fretting about and furious about now, it's nothing new. This has been going on since we first climbed out of the primordial muck. What is new is the technology. The technology to stream live, to even use that, think of that term, stream live. The very term did not exist in 1986. Never mind over the internet. That's another term that if you had walked into your average local neighborhood bar and said, hey everybody, I'm going to stream live over the internet, they would have gotten out the big net and thrown it over your head and had dragged out to Fairfield Hills Hospital. It just did not exist back then. So yeah, human beings have always been the same, but the toys we have are somewhat different. I won't use the word more advanced, but I will say somewhat different. Alan, Sean, you guys are tuned in. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I think you do. Just the very fact that you're tuned into such a thing as an internet to watch Tent Talks Tunes indicates that you guys, along with me, probably have a bad case of the modern man blues, which is the same thing as the blues from the man from the past, just with a faster moving digital package. Yes, it took me almost 15 minutes to get logged on today. But I'm here. You're here. Brian says, welcome back. Thank you, Brian. Good to be here. I did take a week off last week. Just had too many things going on. And as a result of that, it just completely pulled the plug on my inspiration. I just didn't know what the heck to talk about, so I didn't talk about anything and got down to the brass tacks of getting ready for some hot events coming up. The hottest event, which of course is this coming... Now you see, I don't have my calendar in front of me. Oh, boy. Scott wants to know if the jug is in the house. The jug is in the house, baby. The jug is in the house. The paper calendar is in the house. I'm in the house. You're in the house. Chrissy says that Tent talked tofurkey last week. Yes, indeedy do. I made myself a delicious tofurkey sandwich last Thursday and ate it. It was good with mustard and whole wheat bread. What a fine way to spend a Thanksgiving. Yeah, man, so there's just been so much going on, and, the main event, the big deal is, of course, Friday, December 8th, which is a little over a week from now. Friday, December 8th, at the world-famous Milestone in Charlotte, North Carolina, the almighty Anti-Scene. We are headlining the Milestone's 54th anniversary celebration. The Milestone being quite possibly the longest-running independent music venue in the entire country. And when I was sort of pontificating on that question a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to brainstorm about venues that might have been around as long and continuously running as the Milestone, doing independent music. And I couldn't really think of any. I thought of a couple, like maybe the Empty Bottle in Chicago, maybe the Masquerade in Atlanta. You could possibly say Toad's Place in New Haven, although their booking policies have been really wonky for the past bunch of years. So that's the question. Has there been an independent, underground music venue that has run for as long as the Milestone? Maybe some of you guys out there in the internet research team can answer that question, because it's kind of an imponderable for me. There are definitely some contenders that lasted for quite a while that aren't with us anymore, like Maxwell's in Hoboken, obviously CBGB. I think Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco had a real good run for a long time. I don't know if they're still around. I wonder. Anyway, Milestone, Charlotte, North Carolina. 54 years, baby. Anti-Scene, Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. 40 years non-stop running. So what a great way to celebrate two, not one, but two extremely long runs in this thing that we call rock and roll, than having by a big old bash at the Milestone in Charlotte on December 8th. It's going to be good. And as far as Anti-Scene sets, I'm very excited about it because we're going to be playing a pretty healthy dose of songs off of our brand new album. And I do have the show and tell over here, if you guys don't mind me turning away from you and reaching over and grabbing it, because this is live internet and things like this will happen. Reach on over here and grab the visual stimulus, the fabulous compact disc version of the brand new Anti-Scene album, Great Disasters. You know it's on vinyl. It's on CD. This is a Japanese import, baby, on the great Jackhammer music label out of Japan. It is on CD. I got some of them on my Discogs and eBay stores. Just saying. There's an Obi that comes with it, but the Obi fell off of the CD when I was taking it out of the bag. The protective plastic sleeve sent the Obi flying. Oh, there it is. Check it out, guys. Genuine Japanese Obi on the Anti-Scene CD. So we're going to be playing a nice selection of songs from this album on December 8th. And I'm very excited about that, because this is the first album that I've participated in as a full-time contributing member to Anti-Scene. Not only playing the bass, but helping with the songwriting, tossing in, production ideas, just generally being a part of the stew that the four members of Anti-Scene concoct when we all get together and start hashing this stuff out. This album, my friends, kicks ass. And I'm just telling it like it is. So you're going to be hearing a few songs off of this one, and a few more songs that aren't on that one. So December 8th, Milestone, Charlotte. You can put it in the bank, and you can drink to it. Let's see, we got some comments about one of the songs in there, Stubborn as a Mule, is one of the best songs ever written. Well, you know what, Alan and Chrissy, who seconds that opinion, I'm going to tell you a wee little bit of background about Stubborn as a Mule, which is on Great Disasters. Anti-Scene usually has, I don't know, 25, 30 projects going at any particular moment, and they're all in various stages of completion. There's one that we've been working on since I joined the band, and they were working on since before I joined the band, a project called Raw Meat. And Raw Meat is a collaboration between Anti-Scene, Tesco V of the Meat Men, and a couple other guests whose names have sort of come in and out of the running. So it's kind of amorphous, but definitely Anti-Scene and Tesco V. And Sir Barry Hannibal, who is the secret songwriting weapon of Anti-Scene, came up with this song for Raw Meat called Stubborn as a Mule. And when I heard the demo that he cut for it, I said, there is no way. No way this song is going to go on Raw Meat. This song is too good. I want this song to be Anti-Scene. I want it to be on a full-fledged Anti-Scene release. As much as that Raw Meat is going to be a really cool thing, as far as a standalone song, that song needed to be an Anti-Scene song. And wouldn't you know it, everybody else kind of had the exact same thought at the exact same time. So we kind of rejiggered the running order a little bit on Great Disasters, and recorded a full-blown version of Stubborn as a Mule, where it sits proudly in the running order. Proudly in the running order. So yes, guys, Alan and Chrissy and anybody else who might be saying the same thing and thinking the same thoughts, I am with you. That song rules. Rules hard. So let's get a toast of Danbury Tap, or whatever it is you guys are hoisting right now, to the songwriting talents of British citizen, Anti-Scene drummer, and songwriter nonpareil, Sir Barry Hannibal. What other current events have we got going on here? Well, as you might have seen from the very tasty and tasteful propaganda poster behind me, on my label TPOS, the latest release, Tiny Tim, Prisoner of Love, a tribute to Russ Columbo. As wonderful as Tiny Tim is with the novelty songs and borderline silly renditions of, current top 40 hits like Do You Think I'm Sexy, or, Reunited, whatever. This, in my opinion, is even better. This is a collection of songs by Russ Columbo, who is a rival to Bing Crosby and Rudy Vallee and some of the great crooners of the early 1930s. Russ Columbo was right up there with them, and Russ Columbo was Tiny Tim's favorite artist of all time. And so my pal Mark Robinson of Ponk Media actually commissioned an orchestra and had a number of Russ Columbo songs scored and orchestrated for Tiny to sing over. And man, the results are sublime. This is like genuinely beautiful music, sung with real heart and real passion by a man who loved this type of music more than any other type of music that there ever was. So this is the real deal. It is Tiny Tim. It is on TPOS. It is on my Discogs and my eBay. You can also get it directly from me. It's on several colors of vinyl. This one being technically gray, but it came out purple. Go figure. We also have bright red and hit record gold for all of you people who love your colored vinyl as much as I do. Love colored vinyl. Love it. Jeff Coleman, a.k.a. King Sexy, says he would love to hear it. You certainly would, Jeff. Great album. So these are all things that were going on, that are going on now that I never would have dreamed of also back in 1986 when Trash American Style opened its doors. I never would have thought that TPOS would be releasing full-length albums like the Devoted album that I the humble proprietor of the freshly opened TPO Trash American Style would be on vinyl with 2 members of Devo. I never would have thought that. Devo wasn't even active in 1986. Devo was on a hiatus in 1986. And in fact, the very idea of a CD in 1986 was pretty arcane. I mean, there were CDs. There definitely were. But they were not yet the currency. I remember for a darn fact that when Trash American Style first opened, we did not sell CDs. We just didn't. They were expensive. Nobody really wanted them yet. We were still firmly in the age of vinyl and to a lesser degree cassette. The original inventory of Trash American Style, and I can picture it in my mind right now. And I know I'm not doing like a really strict linear narrative right here, but as Ray Charles once said to his biographer, he said, "Don't worry about order. Get the stories while they're hot." And I'll drink to that, Ray Charles. I can still totally picture the layout of the original Trash American Style, which was located at 20 Station Road in Brookfield, Connecticut. And how did it end up at a strange place like 20 Station Road in Brookfield, Connecticut? Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you exactly how it happened, and note how easily I segued back into the linear narrative. That's what happens live sometimes on Tent Talks Tunes. By the way, I think a few of you people who are tuned in now actually did visit the Brookfield location of Trash American Style. Can I see a show of hands or some hearts or thumbs ups or smiley faces? How many of you people out there remember the original Trash American Style at Brookfield? I see a few thumbs there. We were only there for about 2.5 years, but they were a momentous 2.5 years, huh? Scott and Rob from Wide Awake, they were there. Sean Mosher, he remembers. Yep. Whole lot of other hearts and thumbs and loves and things like that. All right, so we got a few of the original Trash alum there. That's cool. And maybe you guys have heard this story before, but you know what? This is the 37th anniversary of Trash American Style, so why not sit back and crack a few tales? This is kind of what we're all about. Adam Tanner was there. Keith Romeo, yes, I know Keith was there. I remember the first time Keith Romeo walked into Trash American Style. Keith was in a number of bands in Eastern New York, Western Connecticut, in the Carmel, Putnam, Danbury area, axis of musical evil. And Keith ended up being one of my honorable ancestors in They Hate Us, along with his wife Jill, who is tuned in right now. Hi, guys. So, yep, they're original trashies. Jeff Coleman, yep, I believe so. Sean Mosher says that I sold him his first ever 7-inch record. Okay, Sean, you got to tell us what it is. You can't just leave us hanging like that. What was the first 7-inch record you ever bought? And it's my fault. What was it? What was it? You got to tell me, dude. You got to tell me. I'm always amazed, too, by the number of people who remember clearly what the first thing they ever bought at Trash American Style was. Kind of the same way I can remember the very first record I ever bought at the great Open Books and Records in North Miami Beach, Florida, which was the first independent record store I ever set foot in. I remember very clearly walking in there and seeing a copy of Still by Joy Division on the wall and just kind of making a beeline for it, grabbing it, paying the $10.99, and that was it. I remember that clearly. So yes, Sean, what was that record? What was that record that was in a cardboard box at 20 Station Road in Brookfield, Connecticut? Sean says it was Gorilla Biscuits. Oh yes, Gorilla Biscuits on Revelation Records, Rev number 4. Man, I used to go down to New Haven and buy Revelation Records by the 100 box lot and bring them back up to the Four Corners of Brookfield. Revelation and Trash American Style kind of grew up hand in hand, X'd hand in X'd hand. I don't even know how many Revelation records you people bought off of me over the years, but it was a lot. Same thing with Wide Awake records, Aware records, Violent Children cassettes, 76% Uncertain LPs, Vatican Commandos albums. You know, we arrived there in Brookfield right around the tail end of '86, and it was the cusp of a movement from the old style of Connecticut punk and hardcore to the new wave, pardon the term, of Connecticut straight edge. And it was very exciting. It was like this kind of buzz in the air, all this creativity, all these bands forming, and they were all making demo tapes and records and t-shirts and playing at the Anthrax and whatever other local odd all ages venues they could scare up. It was very, very cool. And I see the comments rolling in, and I have to sort of back off from that. Well, I'm not going to back off. We're hanging out here. We're talking. Stephen Young, Beastie Boys Brass Monkey. I don't even remember what that was. Don't remember. Sorry, dude. Scott Forbes' first purchase ever was Black Flag Live 84 on cassette from my personal inventory. Yes. And that ties in directly to how we ended up opening at Trash American Style, 20 Station Road, Brookfield, Connecticut. As you guys may or may not know, I'm originally from Florida. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, spent the first 21 years of my life in South Florida, and while I was down there, formed my first ever band, which was called Broken Talent, got my first ever record store job, which was Open Books and Records, and met my future business partner, Kathy Kelly. She walked into Open Books and Records one day and commented upon what a great REM poster we had hanging behind the counter, and we got along famously from that very moment on, because I was a newly converted mark for REM as well. So basically, the two of us were at a complete dead end in South Florida. Okay, South Florida itself is just, it's a dead end. It's a cultural wasteland. It's populated by people who not only don't know or care about good music or art or culture, but actively wage war against it. At least that's the way it was when I lived down there, and if it's changed any, I'd be shocked. On my visits to South Florida, which are fairly infrequent, I get that same vibe all over again, all that plastic, macho, cocaine, fast living, fast cars, bright and shiny, pave over every square inch that we possibly can now vibe is still very much alive and unfortunately well in South Florida. And there are still people down there scrapping away and scratching out a living in the underground scene, and I salute you guys. You're made out of sterner stuff than I am, but I had to get out of there. I could not hack South Florida anymore. And the timing was good because when Kathy and I first crossed paths, basically Broken Talent had just broken up. The band had ceased to exist. I had lost my groovy apartment on South Beach, which was before South Beach became the ugly, disgusting tourist cesspool that it is now. Living back at home with my parents, working part-time at the record store, working part-time at an inventory company, and it was just like nothing was happening. There really just weren't any prospects. There were no prospects for a new band. I wasn't making enough at either job to move out of my parents' house, and it didn't look like I ever would. You know, inventorying was not a full-time gig. The record store was not ever going to be a full-time gig. It's like nothing was going to happen, it seemed. And Kathy was kind of in the same way. She was working this corporate job that she hated. She didn't want to work a corporate job. And so, you know, we were just talking about a lot of stuff. And she said, you know, it's always been my dream to open up a store. So why don't we go back to my home state of Connecticut and open up a store? And I said, you know what? You don't have to ask me twice. Now, another little known fact, a place that I never really name checked too much in the story of Trash American Style as being an influence or an inspiration to Trash American Style was a boutique that there used to be in New Milford. And any New Milford kids out there, if you were tuned in right now, do you guys remember a place called C'est Magnifique? C'est Magnifique. If I recall correctly, C'est Magnifique was on the main road when you make if you're on Route 7 heading north, and you make the right and go over the bridge, whatever road that is, on the left there's like an old brick building with a storefront in the bottom. And it's changed owners many, many times over the years, but I'm pretty sure C'est Magnifique was there. And C'est Magnifique was a shop that Kathy and her sisters loved going to. They had cool vintage clothing and accessories and funky stuff, maybe some knickknacks. And so Kathy was totally inspired by C'est Magnifique of New Milford. I was totally inspired by the great record stores of South Florida, which I will never get tired of name checking. Yardbird, Yesterday and Today, Blue Note, Underground Records up in Fort Lauderdale, and of course, in my opinion, the heavyweight champion of them all, Open Books and Records. So we both loved our independent, funky, cool, boutique-style shops. And Adam Tanner has checked in and said, yes, Bridge Street. Bridge Street is where, I'm pretty sure that's where C'est Magnifique was. So we both had this idea of what we wanted a store to be, you know, just a cool place full of awesome underground culture. It didn't have to be limited. It didn't have to be just records or just clothes or just books or just anything. It could just be whatever we wanted it to be. So we had that idea. I will also mention that another big inspiration was Electric Trash in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, run by Libby Bentley, who was the bass player for Morbid Opera, who was one of the bands who I really looked up to when I lived in South Florida, and who I still like a whole awful lot to this very day. And Electric Trash, I think really, probably more than any other, really had the blueprint for what we wanted to do. That place was amazing. It's like when you walked into it, it was like entering a cave with stalactites hanging down and just stuff hanging off the ceiling, and every single square inch of the walls just covered with cool things. No matter where you looked, there was something cool. And it was kind of dark, and it had so much personality and so much vibe. I think that really we both walked away with the biggest impression from Electric Trash. So Libby, if you're watching, thank you. I will heist my jug and drink a toast to Libby of Morbid Opera and Electric Trash. And you see, I'm kind of jogging my own memory now as I think about it, because a lot of people have asked me, so where'd you get the name Trash American Style from? And the first guess is usually Trash and Vaudeville, the clothing store in New York City. And that's not it. I'd never been there. I had probably heard the name. Maybe Kathy had been there a couple of times, but Trash and Vaudeville is definitely not an influence or an inspiration to us at all. It was Electric Trash. And as I remember, during our brainstorming sessions of what to call this place, our first thought was we want to call it Electric Trash, but we can't do that because obviously the name's already taken and it's Libby's idea, and, you know, that's her thing. We need something of our own. And so it was just between me and Kathy riffing off the name Electric Trash that eventually Trash American Style came up. And so that's how we had the name. And the name didn't come until pretty late in the game. We were already up in Connecticut. And we might have even started moving stuff into the store before we had the name. I'm not really sure about that. But we definitely did not have the name when we lived in Florida. We were just really inspired by Electric Trash, C'est Magnifique, and Open Books and Records, Yardbird Yesterday, etc. So we had this idea, or Kathy had this idea, and I was way down for it. It always kind of broke down to how she had the aesthetic, and I had the technical know-how to run a store. Because Leslie of Open, she taught me how to run a store. Everything from how to write a check, to place an order, to how to keep an eye on things, how to organize the inventory. I learned all the nuts and bolts from her. And those skills serve me perfectly to this very day. So it's kind of like Kathy had the vision, I had some vision. I had the know-how, Kathy had some know-how. We had this real kind of synergistic relationship on how to actually run a store and how we wanted to run a store. So, and Scott Forbes wants to know if it was a goof on Love American Style, the TV show. Probably, yeah. Probably. I mean, I'm 99% sure that we didn't specifically set out to quote Love American Style. But it just kind of ended up that way. It was just, when the sparks were flying and the ideas were flowing, it was just a phrase that came up. I mean, we both watched Love American Style as kids. Who didn't? If you're of a certain generation, you saw Love American Style. But when we came up with the name Trash American Style, we definitely did not model like our logo or anything off of the Love American Style logo. It was just one of the many ideas that was in the pot at the time. So you might ask, well, how do you do it? How does a nudnik like Malcolm Tent, who's only working 2 part-time jobs and living with his parents, end up being part of this thing that one way or another has lasted 37 years? Well, I'll tell you. Kathy and I worked very well together. We were both kind of laser focused on doing this thing. And we both were sick of Florida. I had a really good record collection. She had a really good wardrobe. So right off the bat, we sort of had what we needed to open up a store. And so we decided that what we would do was have a great big blowout. I would sell off as much of my records as I possibly could, and also my comic book collection and my stamps and my coins. And I've been a collector my whole life. So everything that I had that I could get good money for, I would sell. And whatever was left over would become stock for the new store. And Scott Forbes, that's where your Black Flag cassette came from. Kathy did the same thing with her wardrobe. Although it wasn't as easy to dispose of wardrobe as it was to dispose of records. Because I started selling my stuff at, the record shows down there. I traded things in at the record stores. We set up at a couple of different flea markets and sold stuff. We were just like in a real full-blown liquidation mode in order to raise enough capital to hire a moving van, drive to Connecticut, and hopefully have enough money to do the first month, last month, security, utilities, all those deposits that you need to have in hand to open up a store. So we had to, kind of walk a fine line. We had to raise all the money, yet still have enough cool stuff to put into the storefront. And that's what we did. It actually worked out pretty well. Adam Tanner wants to know if Adventure Jukebox predated Trash American Style. Yes, Adventure Jukebox predated trash American style. Now, Adventure Jukebox was a fantastic radio show that aired on WXCI 91.7 FM in Danbury, Connecticut. XCI for a long time was a powerhouse underground college radio station. And Adventure Jukebox was actually one of the ingredients that had me really, really bullish on Connecticut. Because, you know, Kathy grew up in Connecticut, and she told me all these stories about this club, the Anthrax, and about this radio station, WXCI, and about these bands like No Milk on Tuesday, and Violent Children, and Vatican Commandos, and record stores like Phoenix Records in Waterbury, and Cheapskates in Hartford, and Rhymes in New Haven. The way she talked about Connecticut, it sounded like a wonderful place that I wanted to be. Far more than South Florida, where I did not want to be. South Florida had already given me a good flogging. I was done with South Florida. I'd beat my head against that wall my entire life, and I was done with South Florida. So yes, because of Adventure Jukebox and whatever else I talked about, Connecticut sounded pretty damn cool. And I was also really attracted to the idea of a place that had seasons and greenery and mountains and all the stuff that South Florida never had to begin with. And, you know, whatever natural beauty South Florida did have was rapidly being annihilated as fast as they possibly could. Had to get away from that. So Connecticut definitely seemed like the place to go. So, we had the great big sell-off. I gave my notice at the inventory company, and they were quite sad about that, because for the longest time, that inventory company, they wanted to make me a manager. They wanted to make me an office manager. And I firmly, yet politely, refused to take part in that fate. I was not destined to be an office manager at an inventory company. I just wasn't. I just wasn't. When they make you a manager, they give you a raise from $4 an hour to $4.50 an hour and double your workload. No, no, no. I have too much rock and roll coursing through these veins and being pumped by this old deep frozen heart. Too much rock and roll, kids, to be an office manager. For those of you out there who are office managers, once again, I salute you. I think you're made of tougher stuff than I am, because I can't do it. If you can do it, mazel tov and job bless. Because someone's got to do it. I'm glad it's you. Glad it's not me. Just saying. So I gave my notice at the inventory company. I sadly gave my notice at Open Books and Records. And the time came for us to pack up our stuff, get the moving van stuffed, send them on their way, and for me and her to hop into her 1985 Jeep and hit the highway north. And as we always did, and as I still do to this day, we took our time. We took detours to visit Atlanta, to visit friends in Atlanta, which was the first city we were going to open up in, by the way. I should mention that when we really first started thinking about opening a store, our first decision was Atlanta. Because anybody in South Florida who tried to escape from South Florida automatically aimed towards either Atlanta or New York City. Those were the two big destination escape routes from South Florida. We knew a bunch of people who had already moved to Atlanta. And we knew a bunch of people who had already moved to New York. We knew we didn't want to do New York because New York is New York. It's expensive, it's crowded, there's a lot of competition. We always thought that it was better to be one big fish in a small pond than to be one bacterium in a toilet bowl. We weren't going to pinch our nose and dive into New York City's toilet bowl. So, Atlanta. So we took a reconnaissance trip up to Atlanta one time and found that Atlanta already had great record stores. There was Wuxtree, there was Wax and Facts. There was an awesome psycho thrift shop called The Junk Man's Daughter. So it seemed like Atlanta was already pretty well covered. They didn't need anything that we could bring to the table. But Kathy made it very clear that Connecticut did. So that's how we ended up in Connecticut. She was from Connecticut. Atlanta didn't need the help. And we weren't going to go to New York City. So yeah, we visited friends in Atlanta. We visited our good friend Todd God in Ohio. Took a big trip across Pennsylvania. Caught the REM concert at Radio City Music Hall. And showed up at her parents' doorstep, ready to begin our great mission. And here's a little bit of a side track. When we showed up at her parents' house, her mom especially was a little bit frosty towards me. And I couldn't figure out why, I mean, Ma Kelly was a lovely lady, but it took her a real long time to warm up to me. I mean, she didn't, throw us out or anything. We got to live in their attic, rent-free. They put us up, they fed us. They totally helped us get established in Connecticut. But Ma was always a little bit cool until, we finally got to really know each other and I became part of the family. And it wasn't until years later that she told me why she was initially a little bit cool towards my presence in the house. Well, here's Harry. Hi, Harry. We're very warm towards Harry's presence in the house. I think everybody was waiting for Harry to show up. Well, here he is, Harry the cat. And I'm going to point him at the camera and make him be cute for everybody. Make him wave. Hi. Ooh. Yeah, he hates it when I do that. But he's here. He's my boy, the one-eared wonder himself. Welcome to Tent Talks Tunes, Harry. I think Harry's going to park himself and make himself very comfortable for the duration of the show today. Let's see. Robin wants to know where to get a shirt. Robin, I got to print some more of these up. I had a tradition for a number of years where around the holiday season I would make a couple dozen of these classic Trash American style designs. And by cracky, I've just been so busy doing other things. I kind of have neglected to print more t-shirts, but as I'm fond of saying, with enough reminders, I can do anything. So people who want Trash American style t-shirts, just keep reminding me. Just keep reminding me. And I'll do it. Promise. You have my word. Whoopsie. And Dennis Chunga wants to know what record labels were the most supportive to us in the very early days of Trash. Well, I'll tell you, the first one I can think of right off the bat was Schmegma Records. And Schmegma was 76% Uncertain's label. 76 was a band that Kathy name-checked a lot before I moved up here with her. And so one of the first things we had to do once we were open was to start getting the records in. And because of the DIY scene that I came up in, I was already in the habit of scouring the pages of Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside and local fanzines and writing postcards or sometimes calling on the phone any label or any band that had something that I thought would be good for the store. It was all about outreach, constant outreach, And so one of the first bands and labels I reached out to when we got there was Schmegma, which was run by Bones, the lead singer of 76. 76% on certain records all had a mailing address on every cover. So I just wrote a postcard. I said, hey, 76, we're a new store. We'd like to carry your stuff. And within a very short period of time, Bones showed up with boxes of records. Cool. Now we've got a really awesome Connecticut band represented at Trash American Style. And another one, if you'll excuse me, was not Revelation Records, but before Revelation Records. Jordan Cooper had released a demo cassette by the absolute classic Connecticut hardcore band Violent Children. And there's the same deal. If you looked on the Violent Children cassette, there was an address on it. So I wrote a postcard. A little while later, Jordan Cooper shows up with 3 Violent Children cassettes. And now we got Violent Children cassettes. And Daryl Ort from New Milk on Tuesday was the same way. I wrote him a postcard. He came by with records. And then, later on, all the new wave of straight edge bands started bringing in their demos. Basically, everybody was supportive. Everybody was. I think everybody was really excited that there was finally a record store that was dedicated almost exclusively to this kind of music. Like the other great Connecticut record stores like Brass City, Phoenix, Rhymes, definitely supported and represented Connecticut punk and hardcore, but that was really that was our focus. That was a big focus. We didn't limit ourselves to that, but we were bullishly going out and grabbing it and going to the shows of the Anthrax and going to the one hardcore show at Chatham Oaks and going to the Boardwalk in Brewster and, reaching out and grabbing it. So it was kind of a mutual thing. We needed the product to sell and the product needed to be sold and the bands had to be supported. So it really worked out beautifully. Everybody was really, really into it. Let's see, Shagger Dave's got a comment. Dave wants to know, when did we start noticing that trash was becoming a destination in the region for both customers and bands? Pretty early on. Don't know if I could actually pinpoint a date, but it happened fairly quickly. Mainly because of the Anthrax. The Anthrax was already very well established as the best all-ages venue that ever existed. Can I get an amen on that? The Anthrax was the best all-ages venue that ever existed. So the Anthrax was already a destination for bands and people from all over the place. A lot of touring bands played the Anthrax. A lot of people went to go see shows at the Anthrax. So once word got out that there was this record store within driving distance of the Anthrax, it was just a simple matter for bands to make a slight detour and stop by and bring us their demos and their records and their t-shirts and all that. And people who would travel to go to the Anthrax from shows would do the same thing, just make a little detour from wherever they were coming, or if they were starting out in Danbury, the Danbury area, start at Trash, go down to the Anthrax. If you're traveling around, swerve over to Brookfield, visit this cool record store, go to the Anthrax. And I have to make sure that I'm still streaming. I just saw an error message on my telephone, and the screen has frozen on my computer. So let me reach over here real quick and hit the refresh button and make sure that we're still on, because I've been through this routine before, where I'm just yammering on and on and on and no one can actually see me or hear me. Scott says I'm live. Okay, I'm still live. Yay! So anyway, Dave, to answer your question, pretty early on in the game. And I think that was one of the things that really helped put us on the map, because a lot of these bands didn't have distribution. Because the classic way of getting inventory for a store is to have dealings with a distributor. A distributor carries a wide variety of music from a wide variety of labels, and you get their catalog and you place your order of all the different stuff. But many, many, many of these bands did not go through distributors, at least not initially. Like your first band with a demo tape, no distributor would even carry a demo tape. So the only way to get the demo tape was either for the band to drop it off or for someone to write a card and say, hey guys, can we carry your demo? And because we were proactive about that, we, started getting a rep for having this really good selection of demo tapes and independent 7-inch records that you just could not get at the other stores in the area, or sometimes anywhere, you know? And it was just so unlikely that all this was happening in Brookfield, Connecticut. Brookfield. Which, of course, begs the question, well, how the hell did we end up in Brookfield, Connecticut, of all places? Well, Kathy's family lived way up north of New Milford in Sherman. And, oh, I forgot to tell you why Ma was a little bit frosty towards me when I first showed up on the doorstep. Well, it seems that when Kathy was in Florida, she called up the Kelly family, Ma and Pa Kelly, and said, hey, I'm done with Florida. I'm moving back. I need to move home for a little while till I get established. I met this guy. I'm going to bring him with me. And Ma said, no, do not bring any guys into my house. You're welcome to come back, but do not bring anybody with you. So, of course, Kathy brought me, and we showed up on the doorstep, and you can imagine when Ma opened up the front door and saw me standing there, she probably wanted to ball up her fist and whack Kathy upside the head, and probably me too. But she didn't. She didn't. Thanks, Ma. Thank you for not chucking me out right then and there, as it would have been your prerogative to do so. She told her daughter not to bring me. The daughter brought me anyway. And I was welcomed in anyway. So, and I didn't know about that till years later. So, that's how that happened. Anyway, there we are way up in Sherman. And, you know, the moving truck showed up and delivered all of our stuff after we'd been there for a couple of days. I'd mailed a bunch of things. That all showed up. So now I've got the inventory, such as it were. We've got some money in the bank, and we got to do something. It's like, it's go time. You know, we cannot just sit around and watch the money disappear and have all this stuff just sitting there being eaten by mice. We got to get going now. So we sat down and saw how much money we had, which really wasn't a whole lot, and just started reading the classifieds of the newspaper and looking at the real estate listings and trying to find a place that we could afford. Because you got to remember, first month's, last month's, and a deposit. Same thing with utilities. First month's, last month's, and a deposit. Before you even open the door of a business, you have to lay out a lot of money. So we had to take all that into consideration. And as I remember, we didn't have a realtor. We just like looked in the ads and just went from one place to another, trying to find something we could afford that was the right size and had the right feel to it. And it really didn't take very long. It didn't take long at all for us to find 20 Station Road. It was, maybe, I don't think it was the first place we looked at, but it was maybe the second or third. And I remember very clearly, I don't know how we got in. I really don't remember how we got in, but we definitely got into the place. Front door might have even been open, for all I know. I remember sitting there in that empty room, sitting there against the wall. There was like leaves on the floor and the bare walls and this ancient old heater up there in the corner, and 293 square feet. And I just really loved the feel of it. It just felt good. And the location was good. You know, four corners of Brookfield, where 25 meets 7 was an intersection that everybody knew. And when we talked to the landlord, it turned out to be quite affordable. I believe it was $425 a month for 293 square feet. And we had just about that much, you know, plus the utilities. It's like we had just about that much. And so that was it. We just looked in the paper and we found this one spot we could afford. Right price, right location, right atmosphere. Let's see, Dennis Chunga, who was there at the very beginning, has a comment. He says he remembers us talking about how cool it would have been to rent the old bank near the first location, and the rare records would be for sale in the vault. Yes. That was right there on Route 7, if I recall correctly. Yeah, a bank would have been a really cool place for a store. Definitely. Couldn't afford it, though. Oh, well. So we were able to afford 293 square feet at Station Road. And I got to tell you guys right now, that building, and any of you who were there remember, that building was not an architectural gem. It was pretty ramshackle 37 years ago. And God help me, that building still stands to this day. It's still there. It's been condemned. Somebody sent me a news article a few months ago about how the town of Brookfield finally got around to condemning that place. It probably could have been condemned when we were there. I remember very clearly the septic tank didn't work. The well was polluted. It was drafty and cold in the wintertime, hotter than hell in the summertime. Everything was outdated. I mean, that place was quite a place. But it was our place. It was our 293 square feet to open up our business. And we were ready to go. So, we did it. You know, we just took our skill sets, such as they were, and just got to work. You know, we still had enough money to buy a couple cans of paint. We had enough money to go to New Milford Block and buy a bunch of cinder blocks. We went over to Channel Lumber and bought a couple sheets of plywood. We went down to Philip Sweedler and Company in New Haven and bought a secondhand desk, which is the very desk that the camera sits on for Tent Talks Tunes. I still got the desk. The desk is here. We bought a secondhand display case for like jewelry and stuff with, uh-oh, I just dislodged myself. Hold on, I gotta get back. I gotta make like the Beatles and get back. I think I startled Harry. Harry is going away. Bye, Harry. Didn't mean to scare you, guy. Man, it's always an adventure around here, I swear.